about how the 10th Amendment operates, and I'm not saying you have that misunderstanding, but let me kind of clarify it for you a little bit. What the 10th Amendment says is that that there are certain powers granted to the federal government by the Constitution. Okay, so there's a bucket, and that's the federal powers bucket, and there's stuff that's in that bucket. The Constitution puts that stuff in that bucket. It says there's another bucket, and that bucket is the prohibited to the states bucket. It says there are other powers that the Constitution prohibits to the states. And so that is a bucket that are powers that the state doesn't have. It says it doesn't say all of it, it says other powers that are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. That's a third bucket. So if it's not in the federal bucket, it is in the reserved to the states bucket. And folks, sometimes I see them quoting the 10th Amendment by saying, you know, the federal government's violating the 10th Amendment because they did X, Y, and Z. The problem with that is it happens to be a power that's in the federal bucket. And if it's in the federal bucket, it doesn't matter whether you like it or not, the federal government has the power to exercise that responsibility. And in this instance, what you have is Article 3, Section 1 of the United States Constitution says that the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. So there is a power, it is a federal power, it's a power that is in that federal bucket. That federal power is called the judicial power. In fact, in the Doma case, a number of the dissenters go through the judicial power pretty explicitly. But Section 2 of the United States Constitution, among other things, says that the judicial power is the power to decide cases that arise under the Constitution. It's the power to adjudicate that case. As a consequence, when you have a case that arises under the Constitution, it is the United States Supreme Court that has the power to decide that case. And that's precisely where we are. So you have a question that's arising under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, but it's actually a function of the judicial power to decide whether that is a violation of the United States Constitution.
So the 10th Amendment is not in your arsenal to defend this case?
It is in this regard, and that is if the court determines that it is not a violation of equal protection under the 14th Amendment, then it is in fact a reserved power to the states. So it's irrelevant to the discussion, but it is not the defense. There's the determination of, is this in the federal bucket or is this in the state bucket? If it's in the state bucket, 10th Amendment says, federal government, you don't get to regulate that. That's in the state bucket. If, however, the court determines that it is in the federal bucket through the 14th Amendment, then it's in the federal bucket. So that's really the crux of the question, is which bucket does it fall in? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.